The next project we're going to be looking at involves drawing things to the screen. And the program itself is a simulation called Conway's Game of Life. The assignment is just called Life. The basic idea is that you have a set of grid squares. We're going to do 10 by 10 at least. And every step, based on whether cells are alive or dead, they will be alive or dead the next round based on these rules here. So if you're alive, you have exactly 2 or 3 neighbors, you're going to survive to next round. If you have 0 or 1 neighbors, you die. If you have 4 or more neighbors, you die. And if you're already dead and you have exactly 3 numbers, you come back to life. If you go look at Wikipedia's article on Conway's Game of Life, it's got a lot of good information there, a lot of interesting simulations. So it basically figures out this whole thing for the grid over and over again. Then it draws the screen, and we do the calculation again for what are your neighbors. There are particular patterns that are stable, such as the square. All of these have exactly 3 neighbors, so they all live, and nothing around the edges comes to life. You have things like oscillators, so like this one here, the line is going back and forth, because the dead square has exactly 3 neighbors, but the ones on the end are going to die. So it ends up doing this back and forth pattern. All right, so for this to work out, I'm going to need to create a J panel that I can draw in. One powerful thing that Java has is something called inheritance. So JPanel doesn't create the game of life. I need to do that. However, I need a lot of the information that JPanel already has. I don't want to rewrite everything in JPanel. As you may have noticed, a lot of the swing components have a ton of stuff already pre-written in them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take all of the code from JPanel and just change the things I need to, in particular how to draw on the surface of it. So I'm going to create a new Java project. I will call this Life. And there's going to be 2 classes in this one. First one's going to be my main class, which I'm going to call Life, and it's going to have my main. And then I'm going to have another class. Maybe I'll call this Life Panel. So this is the first project where you actually have 2. This guy here, the Life Panel, his job is to basically redraw the screen over and over again. The main Life thing is going to actually be figuring out whether cells are alive or dead, if you've clicked on things, all of that stuff. So they're actually going to work together to make this program work. To begin with, I should probably create a new life. Haha, now I have a life. And a constructor for it. So the life panel, let me talk about that for a second. This thing is going to extend JPanel. And I need to import JPanel. Now that alone means that Life Panel does all of the things that JPanel does automatically. So it's able to be put into components. I can do anything I can with swing the JPanel automatically with a Life Panel. So something that I'm going to want to be able to do is I'm going to need to be able to take in information from this Life Panel. I'm going to have another grid of squares, so I have a 10 by 10 grid of things that are alive or dead. So that makes sense to have a Boolean array. So actually, let me create that in Life real quick. So a 2-dimensional array. How about cells? I'm going to go ahead and hard code in the 10 by 10. If you want to be clever, you can make this a variable and actually change how big your grid cells are. Once I create these cells, I should create a J-frame. Frame is a new J-frame. I suppose I could put in a thing here. Life simulation. Need to import that. And then down here, I don't know if you remember the 3 things we need, but we need to set the size. This is going to be a little bigger, so I'm going to do 600 by 600, I guess. I need to set the default close operation to exit on close, so I don't have a billion things running in the background. I need to set this visible. All right, this is going to be another one of the border layouts. I'm going to put my big life panel in the very center, and then I'm going to need some buttons along top, bottom, something like that, which have to do with starting and stopping the simulation. So I should set a border, or set layout, new border layout. Border layout needs to be imported. So many imports. All right. And then I'm going to add a life panel to the center of this. So I need to actually declare that up here. I'm going to have a life panel thing. I think I'll just call that panel. Life panel. Now, I want to make sure that this life panel is talking about this grid of cells here. Because when I'm drawing, I'm going to need to go into these cells and talk about whether they're live or dead. In order to actually access it, I need to take this cells and give it to the life panel. Now at the moment it's complaining because life panel doesn't have anything that takes in a grid of cells. So I should set that up. I'm going to name it the same thing, cells. Something to keep in mind though is that this array of cells in life panel is actually different than this array of cells. They're named the same thing, but they're actually technically right now pointing to different things. This is pointing to a 10 by 10 array of booleans. This is actually null. It's pointing to nothing at the moment. Once I create this thing, public life panel, with a two-dimensional boolean array coming in, I'm going to assign that to cells. So now they're pointing at the same thing. This cells is pointing to whatever was passed in, which in our case is exactly the right thing. It's this cell array. The reason this ends up mattering is that if I change anything in cells on this side internally, it is going to change the cells on this side. They're pointing to the same thing. However, if I create a new one of these cell arrays over here, I'm going to need to somehow pass that into life panel. All right. By the way, this thing is a warning, add serializable. I'm not going to be doing anything with reading and writing objects, which is what serializable has to do. You can suppress warnings or add some sort of one of these things if you want to get rid of that warning, if you don't like that. It turns out it doesn't actually affect the way that the code runs. All right, so if I run this as a Java application, I have my frame. Hooray. Now I need to actually add in the panel to my frame to the center. Now, JPanels actually don't have anything inside them, so it looks exactly the same because I added a gray thing into a gray center. So I should actually try drawing something in my panel to see if it's actually working. There's a particular method that I'm going to override, and this is public void paint component. Make sure you spell it exactly right, because otherwise you will be creating a new method which has your slightly misspelled name instead of overwriting the one that's pre-built. This actually has something passed into it, which is a graphics object. This is kind of like passing in the surface to draw on. You draw things on a graphics object. So the things I'm going to be doing in paint component, the first thing I should do is actually call the paint component in JPanel. So what I use to do that is something called super. Super means use your parent's version of whatever this is. So that would be our JPanel. So JPanel has a paint component written inside it, and we're overriding it. However, we would like to, what that particular paint component is doing is it's clearing the screen. So I would like to make sure that every time that I redraw, I clear the screen, or eventually all of my cells are going to be totally black because I won't have cleared them out. So I need to do that. After this, let's just draw a line. So draw a line is one of the things contained in graphics object. By the way, notice that there's tons of things you can do with a graphics object. You can draw 3D rectangles, arcs, characters, images, polygons, text. You can do filled versions of all these. So there's a lot of drawing stuff you can do in a graphics object. So draw line takes 4 arguments, two pairs of XY coordinates, and it draws a line between them. So the first x and y, maybe I'll just go from 0, 0 to maybe 100, 200. So if I run this as a Java application, there we go. So from 0, 0 down to 100, 200. So something to keep in mind is that the x and y position is the upper left of the screen. That's 0, 0. So x makes sense. Y is backwards. You can thank whoever made computer screens and decided that 0, 0 should be the top left for that one. Silly, silly computer creator. I guess they were thinking of it like reading rather than like mathematics, where 0, 0 would be the bottom left. All right, so I'm able to draw something. So hopefully if you're able to get to that point, you have a frame and you have a panel that you're able to draw in.